this McFarlane Toys Batman comes with something that you won't find anymore. Let's find out. Hey everyone, David here. I know I'm a little late to the party with this one, but man, I've been looking forward to covering Flashpoint Batman from McFarlane Toys. Now, this is a Target exclusive, so I had to do a little bit of hunting and scavenging of my own to be able to acquire such a tasteful figure here. But as you can see, this is meant to interpret the Flashpoint version of Batman, aka Thomas Wayne, not necessarily Bruce Wayne. This is the storyline, for those of you who don't know, based on Flashpoint, in which Batman is actually played by Thomas Wayne, his father, because Bruce Wayne is the one that perishes in the fateful night behind the alley of the theater. It's actually Bruce who is then lost, and in turn, Thomas Wayne turns to vigilantism through the cape and cowl of Batman, but sadly, it's actually Martha Wayne who goes insane and turns herself into the Joker. And here we have this version of the character, which frankly, I've always really been in love with this design choice of the character, because obviously it's Batman and he's gonna look pretty cool, but of course it also comes with my biased clash of color schemes when it comes to the black, the gray, and of course the red. Specifically, the symbol on the chest, you have not only a very stylized version of the bat symbol, but behind it you can definitely see a red symbol, and then beyond that you also have red eyes as opposed to the white eyes on his cowl and his visage, which is really meticulously brought well here in McFarlane toy form. Sadly, mine came with a little bit of paint decal issues on the edges of the mouth area with the cowl. You can kind of see a little bit of the black kind of bleeding on over. I don't know if that was like a factory issue or that's something that's a little bit more widespread, but other than that, the sculpting and the detail of the face itself is awesome. Then as we kind of go down the waist, you can tell that it has a much more gothic feel to the Batman costume, not only because of the chest symbol that I mentioned before, but also because of just the overall look of the costume down to the red and very girthy utility belt that then creates all these straps for the different kind of, armor and utility kind of acquisitions that he's got going around his thighs, most specifically the holsters. And I'll tackle the holsters a little later on when we finally tackle accessories as to why it is that this McFarlane Toys figure is rather unique, at least in today's standards. Beyond that, you have the traditional padding around the knees and the elbows and the gauntlets. However, this time around, the gauntlets are actually the biggest I've ever seen on any McFarlane figure, but more so, you also have some details to make it look like these are very gothic-induced pieces of his armor that are looking a little bit more like metallic applications rather than the plastic or Kevlar ones that he traditionally would have. Beyond that, you also have a much more stylized cape. I like the little edges and the crevices and the molding of the actual plastic itself, which is a flexible, durable rubber plastic. But then as you kind of navigate it above, you can see the little very gothic-y kind of pointed spikes there at the top of his shoulder pieces that kind of go cape over his shoulders amongst the cape there. So you can see right there that Todd McFarlane was practically born to make a figure out of this version of the character because of how McFarlane he really is from the get-go. Now, even though that might make him look extremely cool as it is, especially with, again, my favorite color scheme to boot, the articulation is also hindered by those stylistic choices. So the head is actually still on the generous side. It rotates freely 360 degrees as well as slightly pivots up and down, so it does get the job done, as well as a slight little tilt from left to right. It's once we get to the shoulders that is abundantly clear is restricted by the fact that the cape looks so gothic-y and sturdy and dynamic and cool. Because sadly, the way that the cape is molded here, it's going to be restricting the shoulders almost all the way across. You can kind of extend them towards the sides, and they are ratcheted, so they do have a little bit of holdback on them. But needless to say, there's going to be absolutely no form of vertical 360-degree rotation. He can only lift them kind of all the way to that point above his head. As you see right there. So like I said, they're a little bit ratcheted, and getting them to go back into their default position is actually a little tougher than you would come to expect. But once you want to kind of elevate them, that's as far up as they can go because of the way that the cape is, of course, designed. Now, moving them back to their original state, they are actually rather flexible when it comes to that additional shoulder piece to kind of allow a little bit of that shrugging motion or that much more flexible motion, especially when you extend the arms, and you can very visibly see that extra circular piece kind of rotating around inside of the torso there to allow a little bit more of that traditional McFarlane posability as you find it right there. Then he does have the bicep swivel that allows mostly 360-degree movement. It's a little bit more on the stilted side, so trying to rotate the arms in place is a little tough, but it can be doable, as you can see right there. Don't know about the full 360, only because, like I said, when I kind of move it past that piece right there, it's almost like it creates a whole reaction kind of effect where I'm trying to move the shoulder piece, but because of the way the cape is made, that is stopping that, and in turn that is stopping the biceps. So something to take note of if you do happen to come across this figure in the future. Then we get to the elbows, where you do have two joints, but once again, style over the substance of the articulation comes back to bite the figure a little bit in his badass, because though he does have the two joints in the elbow, these gauntlets are so stylized and so big that because of that, he actually cannot bend all the way across. Like, it's not a matter of like, oh, the joints are too stiff, or you have to put them in hot water to loosen them up, or use a blow dryer. No. It's physically impossible because of how big the gauntlets are. This one can kind of move all the way up, but it's definitely the left one where you can very visibly see the gauntlet coming into interference with the bicep there, that it's physically impossible to get him to bend the elbows all the way through, as you would expect the two joints to be able to do so on other Batman figures. So sadly, that is lost there. Now, thankfully, the wrists are still fully movable, with the vertical cut being able to flex the wrist up and down slightly. Of course, it's a little on the stiffer side, only because of how I mentioned the gauntlets being so big, and it can rotate 360 degrees. Then we get to the torso, where on the contrary to the shoulders being kind of stipened by the way that the cape is designed, or the way that the elbows cannot fully bend because of the gauntlet, the torso, on the other hand, is on the other side of the spectrum. It's actually much looser than I would want them to have it be. As you can see right there, slight little movement, and you can already see the torso kind of flexing back and forth. I don't know if it's because of the way the figure was created or the condition that my figure came in, because let's just say that I'm not necessarily the first person to own this particular figure, and that was the only way I was able to acquire him. All right, that's only between you and me. So no judgment here, but it is one of those two scenarios that could be responsible as to why this torso joint is a little bit on the looser side. Nevertheless, it can flex almost all the way back to the point where you can even see a gaping hole right there in the middle of his chest. But of course, moving it back to a crunching position is somewhat doable, just not as much as it is to flex him all the way back. So again, I don't know if that's because of the way the figure is designed. If any of you own Flashpoint Batman here, which is meant to be a Target exclusive, please let me know in the comments if that is a thing that yours can do too, or if it's just a specific detail about mine because of its particular circumstances. It can also kind of somewhat side crunch to the left and right. Of course, it's being done because of how loose that torso joint is in the first place. But sadly, no waist articulation that I could really find. I don't know if it's because it's stuck together or it was just not implemented on this figure at all. Then we get to the top of the legs. If you move the holsters off to the side, we definitely still have movement in the top leg joints to be able to flex the legs forward about that much, and then being able to move them only about that far back. And there is some extension, only again, the style comes into play here where the holsters are going to be getting in the way of the extension, so you're not going to be able to really extend them past this point. But frankly, with the Batman like this, I don't see any poses calling for that anytime soon. Then we get to the knees that, of course, can bend at the two joints right about right there. You see before you, so no problems there, thankfully. And then we get to the ankles, where the articulation is pretty general, as you would expect for most McFarlanes. You could rotate the ankles 360 degrees, as well as pivot them up and down. Only on this one, I don't know what it is, but there's something about the way that the flexing of the ankle going up and down is done in a way where the joint moves a little too freely with the ankle, the ball joint inside. So sometimes you have to carefully look and make sure that little circle on the inside of that joint is facing outwards. Otherwise, if it's facing forwards, you're going to be bending your ankle the completely wrong way. And nevertheless, as it stands, there is slight pivoting of the ankle to the sides, but it's more so because of the way that you're able to kind of flex it forwards like so, or flex it back. So just be careful with the ankles on this one if you do happen to acquire the figure. And then, of course, we do have our toesies that are able to be fully articulated on both feet. All right, now comes the part I've been waiting to tackle, which are the accessories. And this is the facet of the figure that McFarlane doesn't really like to do anymore. As I've been mentioning this entire time, whether it be the coverage of the actual design of this version of Batman, the figure itself, as well as the articulation, I kept mentioning these holsters, right? Now, what do holsters traditionally like to hold inside them? That's right, partner. Flashpoint Batman, aka Thomas Wayne, is not justice around. If I can get these out. At the time, McFarlane was actually willing to go ahead and throw in 2 black pistols with McFarlane Flashpoint Batman. And frankly, I mentioned this in a past McFarlane toy review. I legitimately cannot remember what it was for the life of me. I've covered so many at this point that I've lost track. But I did mention in one, and I remember somebody posting a comment kind of retorting to it, mentioning that, yeah, McFarlane doesn't throw in guns into their figures. I don't know if it's a political stance or an ethical one, or they just don't want to, touch that issue with a 10-foot pole. But at the time, they actually were throwing in with a couple of figures. I don't know the specifics of which one was and which one wasn't, but I do remember Flashpoint Batman here being one of them. And the detail on the pistols themselves is actually really cool. It's made out of this like gunmetal kind of design, not to, no pun intended there, but the actual paint applications is meant to look kind of authentic. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they had to hold themselves back, is because, whoa, we're really too good at making these guns that we can't have them be made anymore. But nevertheless, the detail and the sculpting on the pistols themselves is actually rather cool. Not only can you sport them in the 2 red holsters that he has on his sides, but both hands are molded exactly to fit both pistols. So you can actually have a Batman that's dual wielding 2 pistols, ready to take on any other mugger that is going to be creating any more vigilantes, or for that matter, supervillains. Albeit it's a little difficult to get the gun inside. Every time I try to kind of have him hold the guns, there's an awful lot of finessing required to get them to slide in. They do, however, fit comfortably into his hand once you get a gist of it, because at first I thought to myself, am I going to need a blow dryer here to be able to loosen up those hands? But thankfully, they're not that bad. You're just going to have to toy around with them a little bit. But once you do, you can have him dual wield the pistols there. And as you see right there, Thomas Wayne, oh man. In fact, I would argue, why in the hell have we not seen a live-action Thomas Wayne? I mean, Jeffrey Dean Morgan already said he's down to do it. It's just a matter of time of making that call. But now finally getting my second chance at Flashpoint Batman here, I can definitely say I solely regret not getting him when I had the chance, because confession time, at one point I did see him at Target. It was last year, but for some reason I didn't pick him up. I wasn't even covering McFarlane's the way that I do right now, but I did like the look of the character. I just didn't really bring myself to take him to the front and check him out. And since then, he's been completely sold out, being that he is, in fact, a Target exclusive, so he's very difficult to find. But when it comes to third-party sites, especially for a reasonable price, which thankfully I was able to negotiate down to, I can honestly say that this is a very welcome addition to my Batman McFarlane collection. As far as secondary characters, they may come and go, but as far as Batmans in the McFarlane chain, I would say this is honestly one of my standouts, not only because he's sporting my favorite Clash and he looks cool, but these accessories are going to be very difficult to come across with characters that you would expect to kind of carry a firearm with them. So when you pick up the figure version and they come with a accessory that legitimately doesn't make sense for the character, it ruins a little bit of the immersion. I understand the reasoning behind it, but at the same time, as a collector, kind of peeves the collective OCD, if you will. So having Flashpoint Batman to kind of give me that sense of closure, I can honestly say at least I got this guy. And if you guys happen to come across them at a, again, reasonable price, I would highly, highly, highly recommend them. Otherwise though, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to stay tuned for more McFarlane Toy figures. Check out the other McFarlane figure review that's showing up on screen right now. And as always, stay humble. I'll see you in the next one.